The Sony Marvel Spider-Man split is still the hottest discussion topic online. Most fans just can't believe this actually happened. And since it has happened, here at the Den of Nerds, we've been diving deep on every detail, article, and rumor about what is actually going on. You know what's crazy? We came away with a few reasons why you should actually be very excited that this split happened. You didn't hear me incorrectly. We're going over 3 reasons why Spider-Man leaving the MCU is actually a good thing.
We do it for the fans.
This video was produced by Ryan H., one of our executive producers via Patreon. Okay, so let's get this out of the way. No, this is not clickbait. We are legitimately going to give you 3 huge reasons why Spider-Man leaving the MCU and going back to Sony is actually a good thing. And of course, this being a produced video, the idea for this video actually came from Ryan. And in a couple of conversations that Ryan and I had about this topic, he really opened my eyes up to this angle and to this side of seeing things. And I legitimately agree with him. There is actually way more good stuff that will come out of this split than bad stuff. But I also say that because if you're furious about this video, please direct all of your anger to executive producer Ryan H. Yo, sorry Ryan, but I know how these MCU fans be, bro.
Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
Okay, let's get into the first reason why this is actually a good thing, and it has to do with way more Spider-Mans. And this is one of the things Ryan brought up that really made me see Sony's side. I mean, think about this, guys. Spider-Man is super hot right now. This movie is now the biggest Sony movie of all time, talking about Far From Home. And if this was just any other company or franchise, like if Sony was doing this independently, they would obviously want to strike while the iron is hot and make a ton of Spider-Man content. They would want to do a sequel. They would want to do a spin-off. They would want to spin out a whole shared universe. And in fact, we know they are sort of doing that already. They already have the Morbius movie lined up. They've already been developing Venom 2, which just got Andy Serkis as a director. They even have Lord and Miller designing live action Spider-Man television. And it could simply be a thing here where Marvel and Sony just weren't on the same page about this. I mean, think about what we know about Phase 4. There's a bajillion properties out there in the next 2 years, but none of them are Spider-Man related. And so if we had kept Spider-Man in the MCU, it would have been several years before we saw Tom Holland Spider-Man again, at least a year or 2 before we saw his solo movie developed by Sony, but also produced by Kevin Feige under their current arrangement, or I guess the previous arrangement. And then it might even be longer before we saw him in a big event film. Who knows when the next Marvel event movie is coming, although I have my theories that it will actually be in 2022. We have no idea. That's not confirmed at all. And it could be 4, 5, 6 years before we ever get another Avengers movie. And do you really want to wait that long to see Spider-Man fighting against a ton of epic villains and doing cool Spider-Man things? No fan wants that. And we can actually get way more Marvel content now than we would have otherwise. Like, Marvel's going to keep on doing what they're doing. Like, MCU stuff's going to continue to crank out. It's going to be high quality. It's going to all tie together. But then we'll also get a bunch of juicy Spider-Man stuff. All that Spider-Man stuff, Sony's going to be working on that as well. And you're just going to be getting way more Spider-Man and Marvel goodness than you would have otherwise. I mean, frankly, this is already an issue that the MCU has. Like, properties like Ant-Man and the Wasp are amazing, and a lot of fans want to see that story continue, but then you look at how much great stuff they're bringing to both Disney Plus and to the silver screen, and it's just like, where's the room? Where do you have room to fit Ant-Man and the Wasp? And we've also talked about this slight downside to the sort of stringent, iron-fisted Feige-ness of the MCU. It's all going to go through him, be produced by him. And that just puts restrictions on creativity. So who knows, man? In this scenario, we might be getting way more awesome Spider-Man stuff than we would have otherwise. All right, now let's get into reason number 2 why Spider-Man leaving the MCU and going to Sony is a good thing. And this all has to do with what the crazy Spider-Man stuff can now be. One of the sort of unspoken downsides to the Disney-Sony relationship when it came to Spider-Man is that both sides seemed really hesitant to put all of their chips into any one movie or to put certain characters or valuable pieces of intellectual property into the movies that were coming under the shared arrangement. I mean, if you think about it, Spider-Man, even though he plays a huge role in a lot of different MCU movies, he's really strictly tied to the Tony Stark character and to that character's sort of group of cast and character. Like, frankly, Spider-Man is really only connected really intrinsically to Tony Stark, and Tony Stark is not in the MCU anymore, so you can continue to tell all of the Marvel character stories without having to ask, well, what about that Spider-Man kid? And by that same token, you can continue to tell Peter's story without having to ask, well, what's up with him and all of the Avengers? Like, that doesn't even need to be a thing. And we know that Feige has wanted things like Kraven's Last Hunt, Norman Osborn, and Sony similarly wanted different things like Spider-Man fighting Venom and things like that. We even know that there was a Tom Holland cameo shot for Venom that Marvel made Sony take out of the movie. But now that this arrangement is sort of over and they're not like crossing paths or streams anymore, like Sony can use all of the Spider-Man goodness that they have available to them, and that's literally over 900 characters. Like, we can get Kraven's The Last Hunt, we can get the Clone Saga now, we can get characters like Jackal and Ben Reilly that wouldn't have been in these movies otherwise because both studios are playing it safe. Now we can get the full crazy cast of all the Spider-Man villains. He has one of the best rogues galleries ever, and just like in the comic books, like, there's so much Spider-Man stuff that Spider-Man has events within the Spider-Man universe. So things like Spider Island, even though it has other Avengers and different people in it, it's really a Spider-Man event. And then things like Avengers vs. X-Men, even though it has Spider-Man in it and he plays a key role, particularly in one issue, it's really an Avengers story. But most of the time, these two groups of stories, the Avengers story and the Spider-Man story, are existing separately. Peter's got his own thing going on, he's dealing with his own problems and villains, and that's the same thing with the Avengers. The Avengers are usually doing their own thing, and unless it's a big event, which I know these days in comics almost everything is an event and there's so many events, but unless it's an event, it's usually just the Avengers stuff. So this has happened in comics for a long time. We think that's the way it's going to go now with the movies. It's also worth pointing out here, this could be good for the MCU as well. There are a lot of rumors that the Dark Avengers and Norman Osborn were being sort of planned in the MCU, but it seems as though maybe Feige was holding back on those introductions and sort of solidifying that because of the Sony arrangement. In fact, many people ran with this idea that if the Sony arrangement falls apart, we're just going to change Justin Hammer into the role that Norman Osborn had, or some other character. And now they can totally do that and just move on. So both studios can move on, pull from the goodness they have, not have to worry about giving the other side too much, and can just make dope comic book movies. And reason number 3 that it's a good thing is that when you think about it, guys, when you think about the best and worst case scenario for both studios here, the best case scenario for Sony is that they come out and make amazing Spider-Man movies. Spider-Man movies that are great, that continue the story of Tom Holland's character, that involve the Venom universe. They get really wild and wacky, but they're amazing and fans really respond to it. And as a Spider-Man fan, wouldn't you love that? Like, I know we all have trust issues with Sony, but if they made amazing movies, would you be upset? They have made amazing movies before. Spider-Man 2, the Sam Raimi one, is one of the best comic book movies ever.
Pizza time.
And I know some fans will be like, yeah, but Feige was involved with that. Well, yeah, he technically was, but he was also technically involved with the Amazing Spider-Man series. So if you don't like that, technically Feige helped with that as well. And what would be the worst case scenario for Sony? Well, the worst case would be they make crappy Spider-Man movies and then the fans totally reject them and they lose a lot of value and then they probably just go back to Marvel. So honestly, even the worst case scenario for Sony is still okay for fans. Like, we wouldn't be that upset. Yeah, we'd probably hate Sony for making the crappy movies that they made, but ultimately, even then, that leads us to Spider-Man going back to the MCU, maybe permanently. So really, when you think about it, the best and worst case scenarios for what Sony does with these Spider-Man movies is good for fans, either way. And it's important to end off here by saying that ultimately, guys, nobody really knows what went on behind closed doors. We only know what's being leaked and what's being covered by the media. And I know that a lot of people are frustrated with Sony. There's some people out there frustrated with Disney and Marvel, but ultimately we have no idea how this will work itself out. We can only hope that it does work itself out. And in the meantime, I hope this video has at least helped to give you some ideas of why this might not be the worst thing in the world and potentially is actually a good thing for both fans and these separate studios. But then again, I know how emotional and just, very invested fans can feel in these sort of things. So however you're feeling, I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't feel that way or you aren't right to feel that way. Simply what we wanted to do here is make a cool piece of content that kind of brings in some viewpoints that you might not have thought of. So let us know your thoughts about all of this and more in the comment section below. Again, I want to thank Ryan H. I'm having a lot of fun working with Ryan. He's a really cool dude. I'm so grateful to have him on the team of executive producers. And I also wanted to shout out everybody that helps us out on Patreon. Honestly, because things are so weird on YouTube and it's so drastically different sometimes when you make videos and how you're rewarded for making them, we really can't take chances and grow this brand in the way we want to without the support of the Patreons. The Patreons are the bedrock of how we support this channel and how we're gonna grow as a brand. And we've been putting in a ton of cool stuff over there for the Patreons, including live streams, exclusive access to behind the scenes stuff, and just general a place where we can all really talk about things behind closed doors, not in a public setting, about the channel. So if you're looking to support the channel, support independent media, and get some cool goodies and behind the scenes look at what we do here, check out the Patreon today. As I always say, I hope you're having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next